welcome back to the Queen of the Nerds channel. Today I will be taking your requests again, and weirdly, despite the fact that I assume you're all fully grown adults, being that you have Twitter pages or Facebook pages, which require you to be 18, you've asked me for more bedtime stories. So, okay, weirdos. I know, this should be warm milk or cocoa or something bedtime related, but it's me. Anyway, I'm going to read to you from The Bear King's Curse, another of my books available on Amazon. Just search my name, Adriana Garland, and it'll pop up. So here we go. Prologue. A thin woman with long pale hair and a white dress entered the great hall. The shining stone floor of the room echoed her footsteps as she walked toward the ornate throne at the very end. Her long white dress was reflected in its mirrored surface and glittered in the candlelight. She had an air of importance that was in contrast with her anonymity. She paused in front of the throne and gave a sweeping bow to the man seated upon it. "Thank you, my lord, for this audience. I did not expect such generosity." She knelt before him, her hand to her heart. He made a gruff noise in his throat. "I do appreciate your humility, of course, but I would really rather that you went ahead and told me why you have come." He had very little patience for the time-consuming public audiences. This woman had no title and was unknown in his kingdom, and it was unlikely anything she had to say was in any way important. She looked up at him and smiled. The candlelit hall's gentle flickering light made it hard to discern her age. Everything about her looked young except for her pale blue eyes. Those were the eyes of an old woman, just like his eyes were old in his young face. "I came here to claim kin, and to offer my assistance with a problem of yours. I think you will find me particularly helpful," she said. He raised his eyebrows. "You are related to my late wife. She never mentioned any relations nor sisters." His headache worsened with his irritation. Every opportunistic peasant sought to grasp riches or power in some way, and claiming kin was a favorite. "Not your wife, sir. I am your half-sister. I was born the year before you and was raised by an elderly couple living in the mountains. They died several years ago, but they told me the secret of my parentage before they did so," she said quietly. He scoffed. He looked far too young for his years, and this woman looked to be the same age or younger than he did. It was impossible that she should be his older sister. He had furthermore never before heard that he'd even had one. "That is impossible. You are wasting my time," he said harshly. He motioned for a guard to come and remove her. She shook her head. "My father was the Demon King," she said forcefully. "I was born to him and to a medicine woman whose powers I think you know well," she said. His eyes widened. He left the throne and strode towards her, holding up his hand to halt the guard making his way towards them. When he spoke, his voice was scarcely above a whisper. "And what do you know of the Demon King?" he asked. The legend of his father's deadly victory over the invading army, his disappearance, and the bloody death of his wife had led to a variety of rumors surrounding the man. "I know that he would be better called the Bear King," the woman said. Chapter 1. They Arrive. A witch invariably builds a coven. Evil begets evil, and there is never only one. Quote from The Eradication of Witchcraft, a guide. A tall, thin man with dark hair, a dour face, and out-of-date clothes stepped out of the carriage. He stepped shortly to one side with the click of his polished heels to allow a shorter, blander-looking gentleman to step up behind him. The smaller man, with a very average face and more substantial proportions, turned to the carriage and held out his hand to the surprising third member of the party. An unusual, very narrow woman with an intent face and pursed lips stepped out of the carriage. Her braided hair was bound so tightly that her face resembled a skull more than a human face. She was dressed all in black, and although she was a woman, Lord Philip felt a twinge of fear when she took his hand. She looked like the sort of shiny, venomous creature that is best examined under glass. The tall, thin man bowed politely. "Thank you for inviting us to a little hamlet, Lord Philip. We've never had the pleasure of being out this way. Such a quiet part of the country. Your little village was completely unknown to me until last week. I'm terribly sorry it had to be under such trying circumstances," the man said in a high nasal voice that was not out of character with his appearance. Lord Philip nodded as they led him into the parlour. "We are honoured that you would take the time to visit us in such a matter. I would honestly have continued managing it myself if my younger brother had not overreacted and sent for help. He has the nerves of a woman, I'm afraid. After all, there is only one witch." He attempted, if he could, to spare as many old women and disfigured farmers' wives as he could. Hopefully these horrible witch hunters would simply turn around and go home. The female among them, one of their wives, inhaled sharply through her tight face, as though the air around her was made of lemon juice. Surely, sir, you do not mean to disregard all the findings of previous inquests in which significant evidence was gathered to conclude that there is never just one. Witches invariably build covens? She asked. There was no right answer to her question. He felt rather trapped. Thankfully, her opinion was likely of no consequence. I'm sorry, Mrs. Lord Philip asked. To which of these unattractive men was she wed? Lord Philip could not guess. They were both equally cold and removed from her. They orbited like planets, attempting not to fall under her gaze. She tittered in a high-pitched laugh that sounded rather too banshee-ish and joyless. Oh, my dear sir, it is Miss Lamb, she said, holding out her hand for him to kiss. He did so dutifully. Was there ever such a misleading moniker? Miss Lamb for this wraith? If you are suffering under the impression that I am here as the wife of one of these gentlemen, please let me put such thoughts out of your mind. I am here as part of your investigatory committee. I'm sure that my being of the weaker sex was what misled you. However, my assistance in the past has been invaluable. My father was lead investigator for a great many witch trials. As he had no sons, he brought me along to assist with his work. He was of the impression that someone should benefit from his expertise. I watched him ever since I was a mere babe. Despite my gender, you will find me to be a formidable opponent for your young witch, with no sisterly sympathy for the girl. She finished in her queer, hissing voice. Philip was quite taken aback. What kind of father brought along a child whilst interrogating witches? No wonder the woman seemed off. Ah, well, then, Miss Lamb, please have the first seat, he said, gesturing to the red upholstered chair, as it was the most comfortable. She gave a disdainful sniff, and deigned to sit anyway. She waved for the other two men to sit as well. It was obvious that they were terrified of her, and they seemed to wait for her permission not just to sit, but to breathe. It was disconcerting. The woman should be careful. If she continued stomping all over men like this, she was going to get herself accused of witchcraft. Lord Philip thought, as he watched her accept a glass of water from a servant, then wipe it with a handkerchief, before sipping it from her gloved hand. The littler, slightly pudgy man in beige clothes was clearing his throat. He had an unremarkable face, pale brown hair, and watery, colourless eyes. He was so unassuming that it took Lord Philip a minute to realize that the man was attempting to speak. This tore the Lord's gaze from the frightening woman with the clear black eyes like spider glass. She smiled, enjoying being looked at. Sir, the little man began, if you please, where is the witch that we are to be interrogating? He finished his very short speech, and then guzzling his water, as though it had taken a lot out of him. Philip twisted the rings in his fingers. I must confess that she ran off into the woods the night we attempted to capture her. Numerous searches were made, but eventually the men lost interest in traipsing through the woods at night, especially as we were unable to secure any subsistence from the local parish. We have not, as of yet, secured the girl. He felt extremely nervous. He stroked his beautiful waxed moustache to calm himself. The thin man across from him lifted a monocle to his eye, as though to peer at Lord Philip with extra intensity and malice. The malice, however, could have simply been the squint induced by the necessary brow position to hold the monocle. You do not mean to say that we came all this way to investigate the witchcraft of a young girl on scant evidence, without you even having secured a girl for us to investigate? Mr. Pike asked, thinking of the several days-long carriage ride he had endured to arrive here. It wrought incredible havoc upon both his spine and less delicately upon his seat. Sleeping sitting up, eating in filthy inns, drinking warm water that tasted of vinegar as its preservative. Ugh! He was a fastidious man, and witches were rarely found in clean, organized places, or in the sort of sumptuous circumstances he preferred. We'd rather hoped you could help us find her. She is proving incredibly difficult to catch. One simple carpenter's daughter, lost in the woods, should, under ordinary circumstances, be easy to find, alive or dead. But that has not been the case. It only adds to our suspicions that she continues to elude us. Lord Philip was spinning wildly for the words that would not have his inadequacy reported back to people in higher places of authority. Somehow he had to convince him that the girl was a genuine witch, which wasn't, and get her executed before she could discredit that notion. Ah, I see. So we should look at your failure to secure the girl, not as evidence of your supreme incompetence as a lord and squire to your frightened villagers, but as further proof of the girl's guilt. Only a witch could elude your clever attempts to secure her? Miss Lamb asked. Her youngish, pale, and unlined face looked more like bone than flesh, even in the warm sunlight streaming through the window. She smiled, with too many teeth showing. Should the investigation prove that she is a witch, then that would be a perfectly reasonable assumption. Let us hope that it is as you say. She smiled broadly, even her pointed teeth looking polished and shiny. However, if this is the case of a very pretty girl who turns down the requests of too many men, only to attempt some ill-advised social climbing with your father, she paused dramatically, you are aware of how wasting our time on petty vendettas will be treated. You do understand that the majority of tests to determine whether a young woman is a witch or not leaves her quite dead. Even if they are innocent, the test is fatal. Therefore, a known false accusation is a serious matter. It could even be considered an attempt at murder. She blinked her pupilless eyes at him. He swallowed hard and nodded. She did say, I mean to say that when we accused her of being a witch, she claimed instead to be a changeling, a member of the Fae, one of the people in the green, he said, stuttering. Could this be used against him somehow? The thin man and Mr. Pike laughed out loud. A Fae? Who would believe such nonsense? No rational person believes in the Fae. She may very well be a witch and is using that as an excuse for her otherworldly powers. He made notes in his little black book. Miss Lamb nodded in agreement. She didn't believe in the Fae, or in witches, but that certainly never stopped her from doing her job. There were so few careers for women as it was, let alone appropriate to a woman with her peculiar tastes. The need to watch other people suffer was not an asset for a mother, a governess, or a seamstress. Well, that's all that we have time for today, but if you want to read the rest of the story, it is available on Amazon. Or you can like, retweet, and send this out to everybody. The more views it gets, the more likely I will continue reading to you. Good night, kiddos. Sleep well.